An immigrant rights advocate in Normal has been helping recently delivered migrants get work permits and hopes to upscale the services it offers in McLean County. This while McLean County considers a ban on funding any migrant services. Charlotte Alvarez is executive director of the Immigration Project in Normal. It provides immigration legal services throughout central and southern Illinois. Alvarez and her staff spent yesterday in downtown Chicago helping asylum seekers apply for work authorization. It's a short bus ride from the state's new migrant intake center, where some seeking help have been sleeping in buses for weeks. Alvarez tells WGLT's Eric Stock the migrants seeking help are often filled with trauma and confusion, but also hope.
They're hoping for a new life that has stability for them, their family, where they can feel protected and safe and work and contribute to their new homes.
This work authorization just one step of many that they have to go through once they are brought here. Do you feel that they are getting the services they need? Is this system that's been set up very quickly to deal with this, is it working?
The short answer is no, but we're trying our best. Right? So every single person who's processed at the border is given a notice to appear that starts, is a step in a deportation case. So most of the people we see are in some way in the process of being deported from the United States. They have a date to see a judge to start the process to see if they will be deported or they're able to remain in the United States. So that system, immigration courts that are supposed to decide if people should be deported or should be allowed to remain, what are the legal protections and options for that person, is totally overwhelmed. There's over 1 million people in deportation proceedings in this country. There's not enough legal services for those folks. And temporary steps like helping people apply for a work permit or apply for asylum does not meet their full legal needs, because they also need someone to advocate for them in that entire deportation process.
Also appears from the accounts that we hear that the city of Chicago itself is overwhelmed by this influx, and there doesn't seem to be a clear plan to address it. They did make some restrictions that caused some buses to go to the suburbs. That's prompted some communities to put restrictions in place for whether they will accept them at all. How well do you feel this has been managed in your view?
I think the situation is extremely difficult because of the lack of communication from the places buses are coming from, right? If the cities and states knew when buses were coming, who's on them, what are their medical needs, what's happening with those folks, then they could better address those needs. But if someone arrives without warning, then it makes it harder, right? So I think that state officials and city officials are doing the best they can with a trying situation. And I want to emphasize that while this influx creates a challenge for now, I really respect that Illinois is recognizing that this is a long-term economic opportunity for our state. If we can provide the services and support that people need right now, then once they have work authorization, they have housing stability, then they're going to be an incredible economic force for our state. And so whatever we can do now to help provide them that emergency humanitarian assistance, our communities are going to reap the rewards of that.
As we continue on Sound Ideas with Charlotte Alvarez from the Immigration Project based in Normal, looking locally now, there has been a group of stakeholders led by McLean County Emergency Management, local public safety, municipalities, etc., on what the community would do if a busload of migrants were to show up here. To what extent has Immigration Project been involved in those discussions?
We've been involved in discussions about changes to our immigrant community for years. McLean County has started those conversations more recently, and so we've been involved in speaking to McLean County Emergency Management, speaking to basically anyone who wants to cooperate and make a plan together, happy to talk and figure out how can we support each other.
What do you make of what you've seen so far in those discussions?
I think that I respect that the emergency management needs to follow state directives. I would hope that as a community, our response of how many people can we open our community to is more than zero, right? That as a community, we can find a way to support and help people who come to our community. I think the solution is not to send everyone to Chicago, where we have seen that buses are residing outside the intake center. People are sleeping on buses, are sleeping sometimes in the street, are sleeping in unsafe conditions.
Which, to be clear, is the state guidance at this point.
Yes. So I respect that there's state guidance. I think that there's opportunities for us collectively to creatively think about how we can work with the state and then also work with our partners locally to say we have a strong community here and we can open our hearts and find a way to help serve folks and get them to state safety and stability.
And that brings us to a resolution that the McLean County Board is set to consider that would reject any funding to provide services for migrants. And the sponsor of this resolution says we can't be sure that all migrants seeking asylum can be trusted and that it would be a drain on the county's limited resources to provide help. What do you make of that plan?
We're strongly opposed to the ordinance, and we will be there to express our opposition in the board meeting looking at this proposal. It's extremely disheartening to see the McLean County proposing this at this time. I think, first off, the types of services that the county provides are services that should be available to everyone who is in that county. They're core essential services. And to say, if we have a young person who is a victim of sexual assault, should they not be able to access the court-appointed special advocates CASA program because of how they arrived in our community? If we have someone who needs an emergency mental health response, should they not get services from the county because of how they arrived in our community? I think it puts us all in danger. Should the sheriff's office be asking questions before they talk to someone to see if they can provide services based on how that person entered the community? I think it's a recipe for discrimination and disaster.
Let's say a busload were to show up, a busload of migrants, and we're talking maybe several. We're looking at dozens and dozens of people. Keeping in mind there's already a housing shortage in the community of about 8,000. How do you see that playing out?
I think that, we would, I respect the emergency management services are going to have an all hands on deck approach. I would hope that we would be involved in those conversations, come in. We're happy to provide interpretation, provide emergency support for folks. There's also several state programs available that designed to support this need, right? And again, I think if we can find ways to support folks when they first arrive, when they're in this moment of crisis, then we're going to reap those economic benefits. So we can process people in. If those individuals reside in a shelter locally, then we can process paperwork for them to get 6 months of housing assistance from the state, for example, right? So I think there's some upper limit of the number of people that our community could serve at any one time. But we're not asking questions about who moves to our community if they're moving from Indiana or from anywhere else, right? When I moved here, no one asked me about my background or what I could provide or opportunities. I just moved here, looked at where I could find opportunity and settled in and started working, right? So I think that we already have 75 to 100 recent arrivals living in McLean County. We are able to do more than we would think. And if we get past an immediate knee-jerk reaction and we start really thinking and planning, we could have a plan that really helps people.
I think people might be surprised to know that that's already going on.
And it hasn't broken anything, right? Well, that's what I'm saying. That you hear the news of, oh my goodness, what if hundreds of people descend on our community at once? How many people come into town for the school year, right? The numbers we're looking at in our community are completely manageable.
That was Charlotte Alvarez from the Immigration Project with WGLT's Eric Stock. Alvarez says the migrants who have settled in McLean County got off a bus sent from the southern border, or they relocated here after going through a migrant processing center. For more on McLean County's proposed ban on funding for migrant services, go to WGLT.org.